The RYA is the Royal Yachting Association. They are the governing body in the UK for boating, leisure boating activities and courses. Sort of. So they're not the MCA, the Maritime Coast Guard Agency, that govern commercial shipping. They're the governing body for leisure boating in the UK. They represent boaters, so they will legislate with the government and they will campaign with the government to make boating better for us. And they also provide a number of internationally recognised training courses for boating all across the board. So that's powerboats like this that I'm sat on now, sailing yachts, dinghies, jet skis, motor cruisers, the whole stuff. And that's what they do. Where can you learn to drive a boat? So this is a bigger answer than it should be, I suppose. You don't need a licence in the UK. So if you're going boating in the UK, you could learn anywhere, theoretically, couldn't you? So if you've got a friend who has a boat and you've got access to a boat and they're going to let you play with it, lucky you, take full advantage of that. You don't need to be shown how to drive a boat by an instructor. You need to be shown how to drive a boat by somebody who's competent and safe. So if you have that kind of faith in somebody, all good. In terms of what we do, RYA training, Royal Yachting Association training, there you need to go to a RYA approved school. RYA approved schools have passed a lot of stringent safety checks and have safety measures in place to make sure that they're conducting their outside adventurous training in a safe way. So you could go there to learn to drive a boat, or as I say, find a friend. Yeah, they're safe, but you have to make sure that you're using the boat in the way that it was designed to be used, and that you're trained and capable enough to use the boat properly. So yes, boats are safe. People go on the sea all the time and they never get into any problems, so long as they are trained properly and they're not somewhere that they shouldn't be. I sometimes get asked this question because you're on a boat. People still use the word sailing because it's part of our language from our rich naval history that we have as an island nation. No, we don't sail boats with engines, so we would never say that as professionals. We would never say that we're sailing this rib. We would potentially drive it, but the more nautical terms would be helmet, because the station here where you sit with all the navigation instruments is called the helm. Or you would skipper it, i.e. you're the captain of the boat, a small boat. So yes, we would skipper the boat or helm the boat, potentially drive the boat, but no, we don't sail it. Then you have to do the big smile and keep the smile. Do you need a licence to drive a boat? It depends where you're going boating. So here in the UK, the laws are that you don't need a licence, which is particularly crazy. The biggest driver for getting licences in the UK at the moment seems to be insurance, because if people buy a boat, they'll get up to 75% off their insurance premium. If you're planning on using your course qualification to go boating abroad, then a lot of countries demand that you have a licence. So most places in the Mediterranean or in the Caribbean, for example, where we all want to go boating, demand something called an ICC, which is an International Certificate of Competence. The International Certificate of Competence is a paperwork exercise after you've done your 2-day powerboat course. So if you get an RYA Powerboat Level 2, a 2-day powerboat course, you then do a paperwork form, send it off to the RYA, and they will send you back for a fee, the ICC, and then you've got a licence to boat abroad. So that's a bit of a mixed answer to the question. No, you don't need a licence in the UK. It's a very good idea to do training anyway. Yes, you do need a licence in countries abroad. Yes, with a course completion certificate from the RYA, you can drive a boat abroad. So that covers places like Spain and Italy. One of the brilliant things about the RYA is because they've been around for such a long time, their licenses or course completion certificates are internationally recognised. So yes, you can use your licence abroad. Better is to get an ICC, which we cover in this video, an International Certificate of Competence, and that way you've got the belt and braces in terms of a licence and what you can do abroad. The powerboating scheme with the RYA has 3 courses within it that are practical courses. Each of them are 2 days long. There's the powerboat level 2, there is the intermediate, and there's the advanced. So start with the powerboat level 2. The powerboat level 2 course is your introductory to safety and boat handling. You can turn up to that anytime, no prior experience, and after the 2 days, should you be successful and you haven't done anything stupid or reckless, you should go away with a course completion certificate that will allow you to hire boats abroad while you're on holiday, and is recognised around the world in many countries. Okay, that's answer part 1. Then the intermediate powerboat course, as I said, 2 days. That's really an implementation course for navigational knowledge. So we assume that you've learned to drive a boat and you can park it and turn it in a confined space and handle it and be safe and all that stuff. Now we're going from A to B. The problem with going from A to B straight away is you're going to hit a rock on the way. So you need to learn to navigate a bit first. And we do a 2-day essential navigation course, which teaches you the basics of what the road signs mean, like the buoys, how to avoid collisions, how to work out the tides and the currents and the weather. All these things affect us as mariners. And then you can go and do the 2-day intermediate course. The 2-day advanced powerboat course is really a commercial qualification. To be eligible to take this course, you need to have 800 miles of logged experience and have to fulfil a number of criteria as well, which include being the skipper of a boat, having conducted 12 hours of night passages, and that log distance. And also you need to have done the Yacht Master Theory, which is a big navigation course. Most people don't do the advanced course because it's really for commercial skippers. So in terms of how long does it take to safely drive a boat, that means handle it, park it, learn about the safety, go from A to B safely and have a good time when you get there. 6 days. 2 days powerboat level 2, 2 days essential navigation, 2 days intermediate powerboat. A rib is a mnemonic, RIB. It stands for rigid inflatable boat. Sometimes you'll see it as RHIB, rigid hull inflatable boat, but effectively what it means is the hull is rigid, it's stiff, it's made of fiberglass, it's a hard shell, and then the inflatable bit is this collar that runs around the boat, and that's the inflatable tubes. They're excellent boats for all-round stuff, so they're really good in any weather. They've got very low windage, which means they don't get pushed around by the wind too much. They can cut through rough sea. They're very useful as workboats. They're excellent as training boats because of these rubber sides. If we do make a mistake, we're only going to touch things lightly, and that's that. It has an outboard engine, which you can't see, at the back of the boat, and that's it really. Very simple thing. Think of it like a raft with a rubber ring around it. Planing hull is a term you may well have come across. So we get planing and displacement, and this question, planing hull, what is it? So a planing hull is designed to skim across the surface of the sea. So we put a lot of power behind it with the engine, and you've got grooves down the hull that are called chines. Now these things, they help give the boat lift when it's powered, and what happens is the boat will start to pick up speed and push through the water, and as it picks up speed it will then level out and ride along its own bow wave, and this is planing, and so that's what a planing hull is, designed to skim across the surface of the water. A displacement hull is completely different to a planing hull. We still put an engine on it, or potentially sails, but it's pushed through the water a lot slower, and it's a big round fronted hull that pushes the water out the way. So that's hence the name. It displaces the water, and as it drives itself through the water, it's pushing all that water away rather than skimming on the surface like a planing hull. Do boats have gears? Yes, but not in the way you think of as a car. They do have a gearbox, and that does change gears, but we don't have the same control that you have. You can't go first, second, third, fourth, fifth, which is really what this question is asking. What we have here is a throttle handle. The big N means that's neutral, okay? And then the only control we have is forwards or backwards. That's it. So neutral, 1 and 2. As we go forwards, there is a point where the handle stops, which is what we call this we call this tick over ahead. So it's kind of like the first gear. It's just moving very slowly forwards, and it happens the same in reverse. Beyond that, then you're just going fast, and that's really all the control you have. So no gears like a car. How fast the boats go, it depends what type of boat you're on. So that's the difference between the Mazda and the Ferrari, isn't it? So sailboats, for example, go 6 to 12 knots depending on that. You can get racing sailboats that go a lot faster. The rib that I'm sat on tops out at about 37 knots. Just because it does that doesn't mean I should do that all the time. It's not a very good idea. So yeah, the speed varies, and it depends on the type of boat you're on. There are some race boats that go incredibly fast, but I would say for what we do as a business, power boating, anywhere between 25 and 35 knots is probably the speed. You're going to ask me now, what's a knot? So a knot is what the equivalent to 1.1 miles. So it's very similar to miles an hour, basically. So that's how fast boats go. You can hire boats from a boat hire company. That sounds really rubbish, doesn't it? But it depends on where you are. So in the UK, there are lots of boat hire places that don't require any kind of licensing at all. For example, there's one here in Poole Harbour that's got a very tiny engine, and you can go and putt around the harbour for the day. If you want to hire something a bit sexy, then you need to have done some training. And the amount of training is going to vary depending on where you're intending to go boating. So, for example, some places are really easy and some places are really difficult in terms of their hazards and rocks. So think of it a bit like a grading system. Some places will say you need a powerboat level 2 license to come and hire a boat here, because everything is line of sight, you can see where you're going and there's no hazards, it's really deep water. Somewhere like the Greek islands would be this kind of place. Other places, like here in Poole Harbour, where it's a bit trickier, we hire our boats, but we ask that you have a powerboat level 2, a bit of navigation knowledge and an intermediate powerboat course as well, just because it's not all line of sight and the depth does vary and you're likely to hit something if you don't know how to navigate. So where can you hire boats? All over the place, but the qualification you need is going to vary. Until a guy called Archimedes was born, nothing floated, everything sank. And then he had a bath one day and he went, Eureka! And worked out how things float. And from that day on, everything floated. So what happens is if an object goes in the water and displaces the equal or bigger mass of water than the object itself, it will float. So if something's really dense, like a rock or a weight, it sinks because it's got a lot of weight in a small mass and it doesn't displace enough water to counter it. Whereas a boat has the same mass as the rock, but it's spread out over a much bigger area. It displaces much more water, and the water that it displaces is equal or greater to the mass of the boat itself. And that's how it floats. In the powerboat scheme, which is a scheme governed by the RYA, there are 3 levels to it. Powerboat level 2, intermediate powerboat and advanced powerboat. There is a powerboat level 1 as well. It's a 1-day boat handling course for children, so dismiss that. We don't do that because we're equipping adults to have awesome holidays. So just be aware that it exists to answer the question completely. But powerboat level 2, 2-day course, teaches you safety boat handling. An intermediate powerboat course assumes you've done some navigation learning in a classroom and you've done a PB2, and now we go off further afield And then the advanced powerboat course, again the 2-day course, is for commercial skippers, and that's going to teach you to go out in the dark and carry passengers and give you a license, or can lead to a certificate of competence that allows you to charge money to take people to sea. And they're the courses within the scheme. A tiller is a device that enables you to steer a boat if it's not set up like this one with a wheel. So what happens is you sit at the back of the boat. In fact, follow me this way. Here's the engine. When I steer the steering wheel, it turns the engine one way or the other, like this. The power of the mind. And it stops. With a tiller, I don't have a steering wheel, I have a stick stuck to the top of the engine, and I push or pull the thing like this and like this, and that's what a tiller does. It's another one of those questions. Some boats yes, some boats no. So some boats have galleys, which is the nautical term for a kitchen. And yeah, of course you can cook in there. This is a rib. This rib doesn't have a galley, and I personally wouldn't let anybody light a barbecue or a gas stove on board. They'd have to go ashore for that. So yeah, one of those things. Some boats do, some boats don't. You're filming, aren't you? Awesome. Yes, pregnant people can go boating, but I wouldn't recommend it. It's one of those things, isn't it? You're growing your little human inside you. It's your risk if you go boating. Want to risk it? A berth is a parking spot. So it's what us mariners and able seamen call a parking space. It's a berth. Berth in a marina. Does your phone work on a boat? So sometimes. There's a bit more of a boating answer to this, actually. So there's no mobile phone mast at sea. So where I'm sat now, I'm just outside Poole Harbour and outside Swanage. I've got a temperamental signal even here, and the coast is only there. So yeah, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. From a safety point of view, boating is something we do always talk about. What we can't do is rely on our mobile phone as a means of calling for help, because there are no mouths at sea. That's why we all have to have a VHF radio. Now we've got a mounted one here, sometimes it can be a handheld. The VHF radios work up to 40 miles from the coast, and they broadcast to everybody else who has a radio. So do mobiles work at sea? Yes, you can do your stuff, watch your movies, take your phone calls, all that stuff that we're talking about. But from a safety point of view, you also need radios too. Yeah, you can, so long as you have the appropriate outlet. This boat, for example, 2 USB chargers. So yes, we can charge our phone on a boat. As I'm answering this question, coronavirus has happened, so no. But yes, normally you are allowed to sail between countries. You have to make sure that you have certain paperwork in place. Firstly, you're still travelling between countries, so you need a passport. You also need to be able to prove that the boat is yours. One of the border force agencies in the UK's biggest earner is VAT that hasn't been paid on boats, so you need to make sure you have your bill of sale to prove that all taxes are paid and that the boat is registered to a country where it has already been imported. You also need to have licenses for radio equipment, passports for anybody else on the boat, a pet passport if you're taking the dog. You have to get paperwork if you're taking somebody's ashes, but all those considerations aside, yes, there's nothing to stop you sailing between countries, and it's a wonderful thing to do. Yes, you can take your dog on a boat. You can take your dog, ship's cat, ship's rat, anything you like. just be aware that you're going to be responsible for your dog's safety. You can get dog life jackets. I'm wearing a life jacket because it's a bloody good idea. Yeah, but it's not mandatory. But if your best friend is coming with you, get a doggy life jacket too. But yeah, absolutely, he's part of the family. Take him too. What happens if a boat breaks down? Well, it depends on what's going on. So, where we are in the UK, South Coast, there's a company called Sea Start. I'm not affiliated to them, shameless plug to them. I should really do something about that. But they're like the AA of the sea. If you break down, they'll come and get you, as long as you're a member. If you're not a member, they'll still come and get you. They'll just make sure you pay for that quite a lot. Then if you break down and it's rough or life-threatening, there is a threat to life, you can be rescued by the lifeboat service. Again, I'm talking about the UK. Not every nation in the world has a lifeboat service. If you are broken down and you're drifting somewhere you don't want to, chuck the anchor out. That'll keep you safe while you wait for help. And also, using the radio, you can ask for somebody to come and give you a tow. So really, they're the options if you break down, according to the peril that you might be in. Boats are expensive because of the size of the market, probably. Then they haven't got to a point where everybody's got a boat like everybody's got a car. So we're not competing on price in the mass market. Also, they're quite expensive to build. There's a lot of man hours in building boats. A lot of time customising the upholstery, fitting things, making things watertight. There's a lot of expensive equipment on a boat. For example, outboard engines. It's not like an engine of a car, it's just stuck on the boat. It's been marinised, so it's water resistant, and it's got technology in there that allows it to be not corroded on the sea and work on the sea. There's also lots of electrical equipment, VHF radios, GPS units, again specialist stuff that's weather resistant and water resistant. So there's a lot of technology in the boat. Yeah, they cost a lot of money. Anchoring is a wonderful part of being on the sea. You can drop the anchor almost anywhere. There are occasions where you can't. For example, outside Poole Harbour, there's a restriction where, as I'm talking to you, where seahorses are breeding in seagrass, and that's protected, and you can't drop a big metal hook in it. Quite right too. Where I was boating out in Ibiza and all the Balearic Islands, they've got something called Posidonia, which is a type of seagrass that again is protected because it encourages all the marine life, and you can't anchor there. So yes, in general, you can anchor anywhere. There are recommended anchorages that you can find on navigation charts where it's got a bit more shelter and it's going to keep you safer, and sometimes occasionally there are restrictions. But yeah, I understand what you're asking, and yes, you can anchor in lots of different places. Can you drink and drive? No, I cannot say that you can drink and boat. There's no real law as a leisure boater that says you can't go out boating, have a couple of beers or a G&T and come back. But that doesn't mean it's a good idea. So, in my experience, and I've been on the water for 20 years, drinking and boating don't mix. But actually, there's nothing to stop you. No, you don't need to come along to the course with a photo ID to prove who you are in order to take the course and get the certificate. At the end of the course, the certificate that's issued to you is issued to you with a passport photograph of yourself. So you don't need any ID because it's your face. What you can't do is come along and do the course for somebody else because they'd have your face on their certificate, and that won't work. Yes, they can. Any boat with an engine, most boats with an engine, can go forwards and they can go backwards. So yes, you can reverse boats. Some boats have toilets. I'm sat on a rib. This particular rib doesn't have a toilet. It's not big enough, and that is a consideration that you need to be aware of. If you're going out for the day fishing or something, you may be going over the side or feeding the fish. But there are other ribs, bigger ribs, that do have toilets. Boats with cabins tend to have toilets. Yes, so it's one of those questions. Some boats do, some boats don't. Radar sends out a pulse, and then that pulse is measured for speed. When it reflects off of an object and is returned to the radar that sent it, that speed is calculated, and then it tells you how far from the radar an object is. That's essentially how radar works. On this boat, we have a radar reflector, which is there. Radar reflector will reflect a radar signal and make us look bigger than we actually are. So when the radar that interrogated us gets a signal back, we look like a nice big fat object that they can avoid and we don't get smushed. Yeah, there are restrictions on things depending on where you're going boating. Firstly, there are places you can't go because it's dangerous. It's too rocky or too sea monstery or whatever it may be, but there are restrictions from a safety perspective. Also, there are restrictions on places for other forms of safety, like outside Lulworth, there's the gunnery range for the tank regiment. You can go there, depending on whether or not the range is open and they're firing. And yeah, there are other places that are restricted for environmental reasons and what have you, but generally the sea is a free and open place, and so long as there's no safety reason why you can't be there and no legal reason why you can't be there, then yeah, you can go pretty much anywhere. Different options for where a boat parks. Say that again. Ready? Different options for where boats park. They can park in marinas where they have a berth, which is a parking space on a pontoon, and it all gets tied up. It's lovely. You can also anchor boats. That's fine too. Just drop a metal hook into the sea, park your boat on the anchor. And you can also pick up a mooring buoy. A mooring buoy is a big round buoy, or it's like a balloon. Which there's one over there, an orange one. So that would be similar to a mooring buoy. That one's actually on top of a lobster pot, but similar thing. That's a buoy, and it would be if it was for parking on, it would be attached to the seabed via a rope or chain to a heavy object like a lump of concrete or an old engine or something, and then you tie your boat onto the floating buoy. So that's another option to park your boat. Two parts to that question. There's an engine and there's electrics. So on this particular boat, this rib, we have batteries that power the electrics, and that's everything from the stereo, the VHF radio, the GPS, all that sort of stuff. And then we have the engine that has a starter battery and is powered by petrol. Other motorboats are powered by diesel, and some even have electric engines. Now you can get electric outboards. So that answers the question. Nothing's free, is it? And boats is one of those worlds where somebody has invented a way to take your money off you for everything. There are occasions where you can park a boat for free. So when we say park, I assume we're talking about marinas. A lot of marinas, when you visit them for a lunch or something, if you're visiting the restaurant, will let you off parking fees, which is quite nice of them. But they don't have to, some won't. In terms of the free bit, you can anchor, and that's free, but then you're not going to leave your boat for very long at anchor because it won't be there for very long. So yes, sometimes you can get away with it, but expect to pay. Boats have a GPS, which is like a Sat Nav, but different. So Sat Nav in your car, because that's what we're talking about. Sat Nav, you can say, I want to go to X, and then your Sat Nav works out all the routes, all the roads, and goes, if you go this way you'll end up at X. That's the Sat Nav for the car. We have this, which is a GPS. It's a global positioning system. It tells us where we are, and we can use it to program a route, but it won't think for us. We have to do the planning ourselves.